All right. Well, I feel like I'm home. This is where I want to be from a customer experience standpoint. This has been my whole life, is focusing in on customers, or what I talk about as human beings first, customers second. And Todd Williams, Bick Lee, Matt Jolly. Can you guys stand up for a minute? So I got to work with these three guys, three of the best customer experience people I've ever worked with. More importantly, incredible human beings. Todd, you had more hair when we worked together. There it is. Well, I love the word elevate, and I'm glad to be back. How many of you heard me speak a couple of years ago? Okay, so we've got fairly new room. A few of you get this, it's going to sound familiar, but some things have changed. And let me just tell you a little bit about my journey in doing this full time. So when the three gentlemen I just mentioned and I worked together, it was at a customer experience technology company that I was at for 10 years. And we used this philosophy and framework to put at the center of that company to grow our business and to focus on our customers. 2 years ago at this very conference, I presented in Deer Valley, and I walked off the stage and had an experience where I knew I needed to do this full time. So for almost 2 years now, what you're going to hear is what I work with companies and executive teams primarily to thread this philosophy and framework into their organizations. And some amazing things and stories have come out of that. And I'm going to share some of those with you as we go along today. But I wanted to share it with you because I told Dave that story and literally walked off the stage. It took me a little time to kind of launch this, but I finally did. And here's what you need to know. The work that you do is the most important work any organization is involved in, and I think you know it. The word elevate means a lot to me. Every time I walk out onto a stage, I literally say to myself, elevate. I want to bring you my best and give you something of value that in the next hour, I'll give you the philosophy and framework that you can take back to your businesses and use it effectively. And a lot of what I'm going to tell you today is not new. It's going to be a reminder, I think, of what you already know, and another way of looking at it, a framework that you can use. The other thing I want to just give you some context on is I work with some organizations that when I walk in and work with the executive team, the KPIs, the metrics, the NPS scores, the revenue growth, right, EBITDA, all of these things, and I'll talk more about this, become the focus of almost every meeting. It's my intent to slow that meeting down and give different perspective. With the most hard-charging executives and leadership teams, what we do is in the first 15 minutes, we quiet all that noise. And we talk about the objective and why we're doing exactly what it is that we're doing. And to do that, you have to change the environment. It's like this beautiful place here at Sundance. It's an incredible place. I live in Park City, and I have vowed my entire rest of my life to always walk outside and look up and never take anything for granted. When I was driving up here today, I thought the same thing. When I got here, I was trying to find my way around, asked a gentleman from Sundance where this facility was specifically, and he said, come here, I'll take you there, which I thought was brilliant. We had a conversation all the way here. Somebody that worked for Sundance, an incredible, what I call red shoes experience that stood out to me. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. So my goal is to get you to wear red shoes today. Now I know that Dave was talking about a lot of red. This is red in a different way. This is red that stands out for the positive in everything we do, from how we work to how we live our lives. And that living our lives in a red shoes way is something that you'll see will tie all of this together from an engagement standpoint with employees. So I talked about the red shoes philosophy, and that's exactly what it is. It's standing out for the positive, just like a pair of red shoes in everything that we do. It's conceptual. Just that alone. When the gentleman that I had stand up and myself work together, one of the things that we would say is, what we're about to do, does it stand out? Is it red shoes? Just that philosophy was threaded into our organization and gave us lift. It was conceptual, and it reminded us that we should stand out. Sometimes the question would be asked, does it stand out or not? Doesn't always have to stand out, but you have to have the conversation about does it or does it not. And then finally, the red shoes framework. For years and years, I've gone to conferences where you get great motivational speakers and inspirational speakers and people that give you beautiful content, but I was always worried that when we went back out into our worlds, those things would start to go away. So we created this framework. It's 5 things, and that's what I'm going to walk through today, that you can deploy in all aspects of your life, specifically as a leader or as a manager, as Dave talked about. So Red Shoes Living, we focus on leadership, we focus on the customer experience, we focus on company culture, and then living your life in a Red Shoes way. I think I heard mountain activities this afternoon. That's Red Shoes Living, when you put yourself out there and live on the mountain. Okay, so you have a choice in life, and all of you have already made this choice. You can live this life of mediocrity or live a life creating Red Shoes experiences, experiences that stand out. for your friends, family, for customers, for the employees that you work with every day, for complete strangers that are on the street. And that's where I practice, by the way, is I practice everywhere that I possibly can. We're going to come back to this at the very end of the presentation. So what's happening out there today? Just think about this for a minute. You think about KPIs, you think about NPS scores, you think about operational plans, think about all these things that we're doing out there. And then you pile on the political landscape, terrorism, what's happening around the world, leadership or lack of leadership, disrespect around the world. There's a lot of noise that's happening out there. And one of the things that we talk about is quieting that noise. Turning the noise down in business, turning the noise down when we're in meetings and people are starting to get political and creating drama that's not healthy for an organization. It's one of the first things that we talk about with executive teams and leadership teams. It's not necessary. It's not helpful. We're talking about somebody in one of those meetings and we're not helping them, we shouldn't be talking about them. So there's going to be winners and losers out there, and some of the brands you see up here, some are doing well, some are not doing so well. I see a lot of complete focus on the result or the outcome, growing the business at all costs, whether you're a public company or a private company. And we need to grow. We absolutely have to grow because it creates opportunities for all of us, but growing for the right reasons. You see brands that because of their operational plans and what they've been taught, they go off the rails in terms of creating a customer experience that's humanized, that's authentic, that makes sense, and everybody knows all the stories because they're all over the press. Then you see organizations that are winning, that are standing up, and if they do something wrong, they're standing up and say, you know what, we could have done that better. Starbucks, we're going to train the entire organization. We're going to shut down our locations and train. And some of the things that I know that they worked on were things that we're going to talk about today, that every individual deserves respect, that everybody has a story. And it's us trying to understand what those stories are for the day that makes us connect with who we are. So engagement, I'm sure none of this is going to be new to you, but when you think about engagement today, there's over 100 million people in the US who hold full-time jobs at any given time. This is Gallup information, by the way. 30 million or 30% are engaged and inspired. So just think about this room today. 30% of you are engaged and inspired. 20 million or 20% are actively disengaged. Actively. They're actually going backwards with the organization. They're creating drama, right? They're not focused on the objectives of the company. They're actually not adding value in a way that's productive. And 50 million are not engaged. They're doing their jobs, they're showing up every day, they're doing good work, but they're not engaged. So the trick is what could we possibly do to change that model around and get 70% roughly of the employees engaged in a way that's meaningful? And meaningful becomes the critical word in everything that I'm about to tell you. I'm going to say it again. I've worked with some of the hardest charging leaders and executives in the country, in fact, even in the world, that when I start talking this way, they just go, yeah, but you know what? We just want to grow our numbers. We want to hit our bottom line. We got to hit the quarter. We've got our investors putting pressure on us. After about 15 or 20 minutes, when we spend together, they start to come down a little bit. And they remember what you all know, that it's about the customer. And for me, there's two customers, the internal customer, the employees that we work with day in and day out, and the external customer that we're trying to deliver these Red Shoes experience to every day. When we start there, just like Amazon and Dave talked about, or Apple, and I'll tell you a quick story about Apple, that's where magic starts to happen. It's when the noise of the world gets so loud and we put too much emphasis and focus from the boardroom forward that we start to lose sight and the business starts to struggle. About 2 years ago, I was at Apple with a group, and we were a vendor calling on them. And we were in a room full of about 20 people. And Apple is just what you would expect if you've ever been there before. It's just an incredible experience, very cool products, very cool people. It's just a great, great overall experience. And as we sat down, the first thing they did is they came over to our side of the table where my team was, and they put a bowl of chocolate strawberries in front of us. They said, here, we'd like you to have some of these before we start the meeting. My team kind of looked at me and said, what do we do? I said, eat them. What they're trying to do is put yourself on level playing field, right? We're human beings first, vendors and customers and clients second. We ate those strawberries, we had a conversation for 10 or 15 minutes, and then we got right down to business and focused on the objectives. One of the most productive meetings I've ever been involved in, but it's because they created an experience that was incredible. I know Nike is all over the news right now. We've done a lot of work with Nike in the past. Nike continues to evolve and continues to transform themselves. They go through the hard changes. They went through some structural changes here about 7 months ago. A lot of people that I knew were no longer at Nike that had been there for years and years, but they're constantly reevaluating how they focus internally and how they focus externally. And yes, at times, they can be a little bit controversial. But as a vendor calling on them, they treat me better than I treat them. It's called reverse red shoes. It makes me want to run through walls for them. I'll do anything in the world when Nike calls, but it's because of the way they treat me with respect and they understand my story. This is the companies that are starting to win. So Forrester says this is the age of the customer. George Colony, the CEO of Forrester, is a friend of mine. We get together about one time a year and we sit down and we talk. And we agree that in that 30 to 40 minutes that we're collaborating and sharing stories and ideas, that it's both of our goals to create value for the other person. We're trying to give something of value. And it's the way George and I focus on that. And it just creates a beautiful relationship. So I always come to the table with something that I think might be interesting and helpful and meaningful to George, and he does the same thing for me. And it's the way that we operate. We had a conversation about a year ago, and we said, you know what? I'm starting to do that everywhere I go. If I'm at a restaurant and I'm meeting with, a client, and the waiter or the waitress comes up, in my mind I'm thinking, what a value could I possibly give to that individual? And oh, by the way, if I can put my ego out of the way and listen, what value are they going to provide to me? It becomes an incredible human experience and an experience that happens in that moment. We're also going to come back to this age of the customer because I completely agree. As customers today, we have more power, Amazon being part of that, than we've ever had before to do research, to look at data, to look at reviews, to make buying decisions. And this power is in our hands. In our current roles, that reverses on us. We'll talk about how we're going to spin that. So what did our mentors teach us? We're going to take a pause for a minute. If you think about this, you think about your parents, your grandparents, your coaches, your youth leaders, friends. What did your mentors teach us? They taught us to look people in the eye. They taught us the golden rule. They taught us to do things on a handshake, to do what you say you're going to do, to put yourself out there, to sit in the front row. By the way, most of the conferences I go to, nobody sits on the front row. When we're children, we not only sit on the front row if we're at some type of an event, we sit on the floor and we raise our hands every 5 seconds saying, where'd you get those shoes? Why are you wearing red shoes? Somewhere along the way, we start to move back. Now, I sit on the back row as well, so I'm not pointing that out, but thank you for sitting on the front row. All right, so our mentors teach us all this stuff. And then what did you want to be when you were young? How many of you in this room, when you were 10, 11, 12, or 13 years old, are doing exactly what you thought you'd be doing at that age? Is it true? 100%. So this happens, but it's rare, but usually I get 1 or 2 hands, right? I did this at a tax conference the other day and nobody raised their hands, clearly, right? But that's good for you, and I've seen this before, and so here's what's interesting though. So everybody else in this room is doing something you didn't dream about doing. So there's doctors, there's athletes, there's musicians, there's dancers, there's artists in this room. The trick, if you go back to engagement of employees, we spend half of our life doing what we do. This math won't work out exactly right. I know you won't completely agree, but just bear with me. There's 24 hours in a day. 8 of those hours you're supposed to be asleep. And by the way, your health is really important, so I'll talk about that if I have time here in just a minute. But 8 you're asleep, so you just pull that 8 hours out. Now you've got 16 hours in a day. 8 you're at work. Is that about right? No, it's not. I know all of you are working much more than 8 hours. And then 8 that you're at home, right, with your family, significant others, doing what you want. So the theory is if you're unhappy in either one of those 8-hour periods, you're unhappy half your life. You go back to engagement now, and you wonder why people aren't engaged. One of the reasons we created this philosophy and framework was if we're spending half of our life in a job, maybe it's not exactly where we want to be, but we want to bring our passions and our dreams into that environment. We want to create a culture where people could be the best version of themselves, where they're being developed all the time, where they're being seen. So for me, the customer actually starts inside the 4 walls before it goes outside the 4 walls. We'll talk a little more about that. So good for you, by the way, for wanting to be in customer success. Love to hear more about that. That was what? Oh, but it was something you thought you'd be doing. Got it. So I wanted to be this guy. Is there any professional wrestling fans in the audience? 1? Sir, if I offend you, I apologize. You know it's not real, right? So I'm going to tell you more about this gentleman. So when I was growing up, this is exactly who I wanted to be. And if you see he's got red boots on, he's got a chair he's taking into the room. That's never a good thing. You can see the people in the background are smiling and they're happy. So before I tell you who this is, let me just tell you some of the people that I got to meet and grow up with. This is Andre the Giant, or Fessig and the Princess Bride, right? No more rhyming and I mean it. Anybody want a peanut? So he used to stay at my house. There he is there. This is how I remember it. Well, I wasn't on the ground. I don't remember him. But I remember him as 7'4", and he had this big head of hair, and he used to stay at my house. Well, let me tell you who that picture was. This is my father. And his wrestling name was Moondog Mayne, and he died when I was 10 years old. And he was a 6-time world champion, and we lived all over the country, and I got to grow up with some really incredible people. I'm giving you a little bit of the story to give you some context, but then I'll tell you why I'm telling you this. But Andre used to stay at our house when I was a boy. We lived in New Jersey, and my father and Andre would wrestle down at Madison Square Gardens in New York, and it was often late at night. Andre lived further than we did, so he would stay at our house. And one morning I woke up, my mother was making breakfast in the kitchen, and Andre walked through the door, and I was scared to death of him. As nice as he was, I would run behind my mom and grab onto her leg, and she was constantly trying to push me out there, and say, it's okay, and I thought it's not. And the minute he opened his mouth, I was right back behind my mom again. But my mom was making breakfast. My dad was just getting up. She said, Andre, why don't you take a seat, eat some breakfast before you head home, and your belly will be full and all will be good. So Andre went to sit down on a new kitchen table and kitchen chair that my mother had just bought. And he put his arm on the table and sat on the chair, and the chair broke, and the table came down. And he's now on the ground. My mother, who was 5'0", went over to try to help him up. And I'm watching all of this happen. I'm thinking, that's never going to happen. And I'm standing in the corner, and then she realized what had happened with her kitchen table and chairs. And she kind of hit him on the arm and said, this is new kitchen and table and chairs. And I remember thinking, Mother, don't hit this guy. That's the last thing we should do. But a super nice guy. And this is my crazy-looking father, the one that has the crazy look. Well, they both do. This is my father over here, and that's Rocky Johnson. And we lived in Texas, and my dad and Rocky Johnson used to wrestle. Anybody know who Rocky Johnson's son is? The Rock, yeah. So he's 5 years younger than I am, and he's doing incredible. But we used to play in the locker rooms when our dads were out wrestling. We'd play baseball with paper cups and do various things. And the reason I put him in here, because I'm going to wrap this all together here in just a minute. If you follow him on social media, one of his core principles is kindness. And he's a hardworking individual, but he takes people with him, and he creates an environment where people want to be part of him and around him, and he does things for people, the gift of a surprise. He surprises his fans all the time, and you see these stories that are out there all the time, but in his mind, kindness is one of the most powerful things that you can have. It also happens to be one of the pillars of Red Shoes. So I'd sit in the locker room with my father when he'd get ready to wrestle. We'd be back there with all of the characters back there, all nice, people, and they would come out and ask my dad, say, are you ready, Mr. Mayne, to go out and wrestle? And he would say yes. He'd have those tights on, those red boots on, and he'd reach down and grab my little hand, and we would walk out of the locker room and walk down this dark corridor where the two doors at the end of the corridor is where the arena was. And there'd be 2 security guards on each side of us. We'd walk all the way down the corridor. The security guards would knock on the door. Security guards on the other side would knock back, indicating my father was there, and they knew he was there. And then you could hear him announce my dad for the next event. And they would, as they do, they would really build it up and blow it out, and the people would start to scream. And then those doors would open up. My father would push me back. I never got to walk through those doors with him. And he would go out into this chaotic crowd of screaming fans and cheering people. And those doors, the energy, and the feeling of that arena would hit me in the chest, and then those doors would shut. And I remember being little. When I tell the story, I still get cold chills because it was such an amazing experience for me. And I thought, where is he going? And I knew what he did, knew where he was going, but I was just young enough that it was always just a little bit scary for me. And here's why I tell you the story. After he would get done wrestling, they would take his fans, they would line them up in that hallway. I'd go back to the locker room, they'd bring me back. My dad would come back through those doors sweaty, and back in the day, sometimes bloody, and there would be all of his fans. Now, he wrestled as a bad guy most of the time because he was a really good bad guy. I watched him grab the little lady's cane one time because she was hitting him on the back as he went into the ring with the cane, and he threw it across the ring, and of course, everybody went crazy. But when he came back through those doors, he took his persona, his ego, his title, and he pushed it away, and he became the most beautiful human being in my dad again. And he would get down on one knee, and he would talk to his fans. I watched him give those red wrestling boots away multiple times to people. And he treated people with such kindness and respect, and that's why people loved him. He's been gone now 40 years this year, and we still get people that reach out to us about my dad. And all of the stories have nothing to do with wrestling. They all have something to do with a shirt off his back or a moment in time, etc. Again, we're going to tie all this together here in just a minute. So what do these red shoes represent? As you guys walked in here today, there were red shoes experiences that were happening with each one of you, and there will be red shoes experiences that continue to happen as you go throughout the next couple of days. These are experiences that stand out. There's a keen awareness to red shoes that starts to happen, and you'll see it. This is a security camera from around the world showing red shoes experiences happening all over the world. So let me play that for you really quick and see if you can point them out. Once you subscribe to the philosophy and then understand the framework, you look for these opportunities. And I'm going to take you through the 5 pillars now, and we'll talk about how we line those up and why they became what they did. So this is the 5-pillar framework. So remember, the philosophy alone is conceptual. It makes sense to stand out for the positive. And by the way, this is personalized and unique to all of you. It's not saying here's a framework and everybody needs to behave a certain way. Wherever you are is where you use the philosophy and framework. Some people are a little more quiet, a little more reserved. Some people a little more out there and a little more loud, potentially. So the reason this philosophy works is because it crosses all generations, crosses all diversity, and you can use it in your own personal way to affect change. Now, sometimes organizations say, this is what red shoes means to us in terms of our goals, our values, and objectives, and they tie it to it, and that's okay. But what we've discovered in the journey of achieving the objective is people personalize it, and that's where companies and individuals get lift. This is what keeps the spirit of all of you alive. Now, we call it 5 pillars. This is 18 years of corporate turnarounds and 10 years of running a technology company. But here's what I want to tell you. It doesn't have to be these 5. I say these 5 is the place to come home to and a place to start. You might have your own pillars to add to it, or you might only focus on a couple of these. So if you're on the spectrum, somewhere on what I will call the red shoe spectrum, you're doing great. It's companies and individuals and leaders that are completely off the spectrum. The other thing I want to tell you, you don't have to go very far anymore to stand out. How many of you call somebody on the phone today and they actually answer their phone? Just a couple of people, right? But when somebody does answer their phone, when you call them, whether it's business or personal, your chances personal are probably a little better than business, but when they actually answer their phone, it's a surprise. I talk to people, every time they answer the phone, I say, my goodness, I thank you for answering your phone. That's red shoes. It didn't used to be. Responding to emails can be red shoes. I know we all in this room get a lot of email, I'm sure. But just responding, or even responding and saying, you know what, I'm going to be busy for the next couple hours. I see you. I know that you sent me an email. Bear with me, I will get back to you. That's red shoes. There's all these little and subtle ways where you can create and elevate, lift in creating red shoes experiences. Are the BombBomb people in the room? So BombBomb, if you don't know BombBomb, I'll give you a plug here. You probably do, but it's a video platform that I use. I use it all over the world. I just sent videos out to executives on the East Coast because I'm doing a leadership event out there for Spartan. And I have the ability to actually personalize the video that I send them in an email. And I use their name, and I talk a little, not too creepy, but I can talk a little bit about, their roles and what they're up to. It is one of the most successful things I've done to stand out in an authentic way. It's not just an email, but it's actually me talking to them. That's an example, that company, of Red Shoes and how I use that. So here's the 5-pillar framework. Awareness. Awareness says when you walk out of here today, and I'm sure you've been doing it since you got here, look up. Be aware of the beautiful mountains, right? Be aware of who's in front of you, regardless of who they are or what their title is. And this is really important. I'll leave here today and fly to Florida. I'm doing a couple of events in Florida this week. And the minute I leave, I start thinking about awareness. From the person that checks me in at Delta, to the purser, or the steward or stewardess on the plane, to people that I interact with. And by the way, when you subscribe to the Red Shoes philosophy or leadership, it's exhausting because you're constantly on it, which I'll just quickly talk about health of everybody in this room. Health is critically important to the success of being a leader and a manager, especially with what you do when you're on the front lines, because you get worn out. You get the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like for you. Whether it's mindfulness, it's yoga, it's Pilates, it's lifting weights, it's running, meditation, whatever it is. We spend a lot of time working with leaders and executives in this. In fact, it's one of the first workshops that we do, because you can't take care of others unless you're taking care of yourself, period. So awareness is also part of that. Let me take you a little further. This is Joshua Bell. And if you know Joshua Bell, he's a famous violinist, and the Washington Post did a little experiment. It's been some time now, about 8 or 9 years ago, roughly. And they took Joshua and they said, listen, we want to put you in the metro station and let you play this violin. And the violin, by the way, it was a $3 million valued Stradivarius violin that his parents gave him. They now say that violin is valued at about $8 to $9 million. And he plays it every day, which I think is a beautiful thing. So they put him in a ball cap, they put him in a pair of jeans, they put him in the metro station and said, we want you to play for about 45 minutes early in the morning as people are commuting. And we want to see if anybody pays any attention to the music that you're playing. So they put Joshua there. There he is. He played for 45 minutes. There's a YouTube video out there that they've sped up. You can actually go and watch. And roughly 1,000+ people go by him during this time. 30 to 40 slow down, many of which were children on the commute with their parents, which I thought was interesting. 7 to 8 people actually give him money. And one lady at the very end recognizes him for who he is. And she says something like, only in DC would this ever happen. So here's the theory of awareness. How many of our employees, how many of our customers, how many strangers that are standing in front of us are playing music that they want us to hear, and none of us are paying any attention to it at all? So you go back to the noise of the world and everything going on, and this is why I talk about we have to turn that noise down a little bit. And this is exactly what Dave and Burke have been talking about as well, right? All of that stuff that's there is important, but if we get lost in it, we get lost in it. I was with a major organization in Seattle a few years back, and we were talking about their key drivers, and one of their key drivers that increased their customer satisfaction, the number one key driver was friendliness. So we had the data to back it up. We were actually talking to them about why it was important. What we didn't tell them is how to apply it in their business. That was going to be something they were going to have to figure out. But somewhere along the way, I was actually up talking, and one of the executives said, Lonnie, I just want to make sure I understand exactly what you're saying. I said, sure. And he said, you're telling us, if we're friendly to people, our customers, that they'll like that. Now, how noisy does the world have to get to actually ask that question? Now, to his credit, he looked down and he smiled and he said, I cannot believe I just asked that question, right? This is what we're talking about. So awareness says we're keenly aware. We go to lunch, we take our phones, we put them down. By the way, this isn't perfection. I learned this a long time ago. To be a Red Shoes leader and create Red Shoes experiences, I used to believe that you had to be on your game all the time, but I'm human. We're not always going to get it right. Once in a while, we might show up late to a meeting. We actually might forget to send an email, or we might have our phone in front of us at lunch when we're, with a client, friends, family, or other, and we're completely unaware. So I always say, leave a little room to be human. I've gained a sense of humor about it because I do what I call bonehead things every single day. And it used to drive me crazy. I would think, gosh, I gotta do this better and that better. One time I grabbed 2 shoes to go present at a conference. They were red Converse shoes. They kind of looked the same. I had 2 right shoes. I had to wear them. And I talked about it from stage, and they kept showing my feet during the presentation. My feet, not perfect. All right, I'm gonna move along. Gratitude. This is not, it's not just mine. Everybody talks about gratitude, but this is one I think that if you practice on a daily basis, and you're grateful for this room, you're grateful for the content, you're grateful for the speakers, you're grateful for the food, grateful for the environment, grateful for your jobs. You go through gratitude in every way you can. What gratitude does in being grateful is it opens you up as a human being. It opens you up as a leader. And when you're ungrateful, you close off. Your world becomes smaller. You don't allow anybody to you. So gratitude is something when you practice it, you start to open up. It actually is a little bit uncomfortable. I have this thing that I like to say, how did I get here? And whenever I ask myself that question, it's usually in a moment where I'm grateful that I'm there. And I believe gratitude becomes a big part of that. Now, sometimes as we work in our environments, the leaders, the executives, whoever's around us, they're not expressing gratitude. The key is you have to keep giving it. And I've seen good people that are very gracious become ungrateful and closed off. We have to change their perspective. You have to get them to Sundance, get them up on the mountain so they can see the world in a completely different way. One of the best parts of my job is I get to work with so many different organizations and companies that my clarity is completely different now. Because I can step out and step back in, and I can see what happens. People's unawareness, people that are not grateful. You can feel the compression. You can feel the energy. I told Dave as you guys were coming in the room, I'll go to 2 conferences this week after this in Florida, and I said I can sit back and I can feel the energy in a room. Like customer experience, customer success individuals, you have a different energy. It comes out of you. You can already tell that you're grateful that you're here and that the content you're going to get and the interaction and sense of community with each other. Everybody has a story, most powerful one. Today, every one of you has a story that's different than your story from yesterday. As a leader, as a manager, as a human being, when I connect with you, if I can kind of start to understand your story, then I can connect with you in a completely different way. Once again, once you're on this path, it becomes a little more exhausting. So I met Casper. Casper's Danish and English, and I learned a lot about him today in just a few minutes as we just chatted outside that works for ClientSuccess. This is how we connect. I got to meet these fine gentlemen today, and I told them I wouldn't remember their names, and I don't. But, we created an experience, and we started to connect, and we started to get to know each other. Your environment gets better. The experience gets better. So the Red Shoes philosophy and framework gets better when you get on that spectrum that we talked about. I'm going to show you a video that's a little bit heavy. It'll bring home the concept of everybody has a story, but I promise I'll bring you right back up right after this. And we would, right? So we turn the volume down a little bit. We see people as human beings first, customer second. And that's a path that you get on. You keep coming back at it and speaking to a room full of experts here. But sometimes we have to convince those that are around us of what we're trying to do. The work you're doing is incredibly powerful and important, and it's meaningful. And I love that word. We're going to run out of time, so I'm going to keep moving along. Respect and kindness, one of the simplest forms within Red Shoes that you can apply. Just being kind. You know, if you've spent any time over in London, it's a little different culture, a little more reserved. You get on the tube, everybody, not too dissimilar to the US, is on their phones or they're reading their papers or their books, and they have their heads down. But every once in a while, it always seems to happen in London, somebody will look over at me and just kind of give me a little nod, and I'll give them a nod back. And it's just that moment of kindness and respect that says, I saw you. Thank you for nodding your head. Don't know what you mean, what you want, where you're at in your life, but I see you as a human being. You know, as Americans, we move so fast. And I've done this myself, but when I can slow down just a little bit, pay attention and see people for who they are, maybe what their insecurities are, their fears, or if they're happy or if they're not, this is what makes the world go around. You've ever noticed when there's a catastrophe somewhere in the world, how the entire world comes together? I used to ask myself, why is that? And the minute that goes away, we go back into our own worlds and we kind of do our own things again. We push people away. But in moments of tragedy, we come together. And it goes away. We keep coming back. It's because at the core of who we are is right here. Just we have to remind each other of those things. And this is not warm and fuzzy stuff. All of this creates performance. And this is my favorite thing. And I say this unapologetically, undeniably, and I've proven it over and over and over and over again. This is not warm and fuzzy stuff. You will get more from people, more out of yourself, more from your customers, more from the world when you show up this way. So the concept of everybody has a story. People get married, they go on vacation, they receive awards, they have babies. There's all this positive stuff about everybody's story as well. We want to know that stuff too. We can show up and meet people with wherever they are. And if we're healthy enough and strong enough, sometimes we can even reverse red shoes them. You ever come across a grumpy person in a business? Reverse red shoes them. Simply say, how you doing today? That's it. Watch what happens. Every time I get on a plane, it'll happen today. Everybody's stressed out. Everybody's going somewhere. Nobody's moving fast enough. Everybody's bags are all over the place. The pursers are really stressed out. And I simply just say, in my mind, I can see you. How are you doing today? And this is in almost every case, what happens? Somebody saw him. And then I say, hang in there, you're doing a great job. I get more bottles of water and more bags of peanuts by making that one comment. But people want to be seen. So respect and kindness. This is my grandmother where the arrow is. My grandfather's also in that picture. He's just below her. She's 8 months pregnant with my father, the professional wrestler there. This is in Sausalito, California. And my grandparents lived in a chicken coop. They didn't have enough money, and they found a little chicken coop. My grandmother said they took like cardboard and kind of put it on the inside to make it a little more warm, and she wanted to get out of that. They weren't making the money. It was during the war, and my grandmother said, I think I should go to work. My grandfather said, I don't think it's a great idea. 8 months pregnant with our child. One day they got into a little bit of a tiff. That's the word they used to use, a tiff. And my grandmother thought, okay, well, I'll show you. She went down to the shipyard, signed up to become a welder of Liberty ships. When they found out who she was, they assigned her to my grandfather's crew. So my grandmother showed up. My grandfather, who always wore his glasses down over his nose, just shook his head. And I used to ask him, so what happened? He goes, what could I do? It was your grandma. Her nickname, her name was Blanche. Her nickname was Avalanche Blanche. So that I give you some perspective. Here's why I tell you this story. Now I want you to also go back and think about the story I told you about my father. Treat those who have more than you as equals, and those who have less than you as kings and queens. And she would tell me this, and she'd say, Lonnie, if you can live your life that way, most of the time, your life will count for plenty. And when I go back to my father and all the experiences I had with him, she clearly taught him the very same thing. There were other family members and people that my grandmother influenced that was the same way. So I'm not perfect, but this is how I try to show up every single day. And I evaluate that on a daily basis. We'll talk more about that here in just a sec. All right, here's the fifth one. Put yourself out there. This is about sitting in the front row, right? It's about raising your hand with a question. It's about all these things that sometimes we don't do for maybe all the right reasons or all the wrong reasons. It's about living your dreams, professionally and personally. Passion is just passion until you put it to action. You have to practice this every day. There's a coffee shop in Park City that I go to every single morning. And when I go in, I take all 5 of these pillars and I line them up. I'm completely aware when I walk in how busy they are, who's working, what the countenance of people are. I can kind of tell. Sometimes David looked a little tired this morning. David's in school. He's been studying. Just by how he responds to me, I can start to see where he's at. I'm always grateful to be there because they're always talking to me. Whenever I have my red shoes on, they always go, "Where are you going? You're going to present again." Kindness and respect. Everybody has a story. You have to connect. We start to ask a few questions. This coffee shop, I have to back off a little bit because I'm also aware when people are behind me and respecting the fact they're trying to get their coffee. And if I'm in the way, of trying to find out the story, there's just too much going on there. Kindness and respect has to show up no matter where you go. By the way, I work with executives that walk into a room, and when they're unkind, awareness kicks in and they go, I realize what I just said probably didn't come out exactly the way that I wanted it to. Let me restate what I was trying to say. And then they turn over, because I do board observations, so I'll actually sit in a boardroom and watch some of these dynamics go on. And they'll look at me and I'll go, there you go, right? So it's just a journey. And then how I put myself out there in that coffee shop is I have to do something. And sometimes it takes a little longer to figure out, what is it that I'm going to do? Maybe there's a new person there and I'm going to introduce myself to them. That's putting yourself out there. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But I run through all 5 in an instant. That's the framework. And you could apply that to almost any human interaction that you possibly can. In some respects, people will say, can you apply it to the service you're providing or to a product? You can apply the philosophy, and sometimes, yes, you can apply the framework into things like product and services as well, but definitely in your experiences with human beings. So I'll fly today. I'm going to be really quick, so bear with me here. There's 3 kinds of people that come onto the airplane and sit down. First person, comes in, has probably had a long week at a conference, sits down, pulls their newspaper out and says, I know there's people that need help here and there putting bags up, but I'm not going to see anybody today. I'm all by myself. I'm tired. I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't want to see anybody. And then they see that person coming down with that big bag. They go to put it up, and they're thinking in their mind, I was taught to put myself out there. I was taught all these concepts and philosophies, but I'm not going to do anything, and so they don't. Person struggles with the bag, away they go. That's person number 1 sitting there. Person number 2, same situation, sees the person coming with the bag. They go to put the bag up, and the person thinks, I should help. I should put myself out there. I'm aware of them. I'm grateful that I didn't pack that bag. Like, they start going through all these things, but then the insecurity in the world, the front row starts moving towards the back row, and they say, if I jump up, somebody else is going to jump up, then it's going to make me look funny, and they hesitate, they do nothing. Another passenger jumps up and helps the person put the bag up. Hesitation sits there. That's person number 2. Person number 3 simply gets up, puts the bag up, person says thank you, you say you're welcome, you go right back to the things that you were doing before. That's red shoes. That's it. This becomes the biggest curse that I tell at every conference, because now I go get on the plane, I'm worried somebody's heard me tell the story, so if somebody needs help, I'm up, I'm down. Can I help you with this? I'm moving around. Quick side note, I'm in Lake Tahoe presenting at an event last year. Another presenter was Colonel Nye, and Colonel Nye was presenting after me. Colonel Nye was the head of communications for the military. Anything that happened in the world from a U.S. standpoint, he was on the ground within 24 hours of that event, reporting back to the rest of the military. From the capture of Saddam Hussein to the bombing of the USS Cole, he was there. Colonel Nye was there. Stands about that tall and very intimidating. He walks up to me after the speech. He goes, Lonnie, there's four kinds of people. I said, really? He goes, yeah. And I'm going to tell you about the 4th. The 4th one sees that person coming down with the big bag. They jump up and say, what the hell were you thinking packing all that stuff in your bag? And he goes, and I'm that guy. I said, okay, forever I will honor you in that. All right, so I'm in Washington, D.C. with my now 21-year-old son when he was 12. I used to take my children on trips with me so they could have different experiences. We check into the hotel late at night, about midnight, and I'm telling my son, let's go see the White House. Put our bags in the room. It's a great experience. You'll really appreciate it and enjoy it. And the gentleman hears, he's aware, he hears me telling this story. Now, he's running through his own pillars in his mind, and he says, Mr. Mayne, do you mind if I give your son something? So he walks behind the counter, comes up, gets down on one knee in front of my son, and he hands him this blue box. And inside the blue box is that crystal where they etch things on the inside, and it's the White House. And he looks at my son and he says, something tells me you're going to live here someday. I want you to have this. Red shoes all the way through, right? And this is years ago. I never got his name. I wish I would have reached back out to him, but just an incredible experience. All right, let me show you a brand, and this is a little bit dated. I hope some of you have seen this video where all 5 of the pillars are showing up. I'm gonna let the video speak for itself, but watch for them. Watch for awareness, watch for kindness and respect, watch for gratitude, putting yourself out there, and everybody has a story. Let me play that.
Evet, kameralar kaydı girsin arkadaşlar.
Mala hazır ol. Şimdi. Taksi hazır ol. Hareket.
Arkadaşlar 30 saniye sonra meydandayız.
Anlaşıldı.
Okay, I'm a little over my time, so I'm gonna keep moving quickly here. These experiences are becoming very personal now, and technology is helping us with those personal experiences. But if you go back to the pillars and everybody has a story, that's how we personalize our experiences we have with each other as well. So that video is a little dated. Samsung did a wonderful job in creating an environment where it's a personalized experience. But just think about that. As a Red Shoes leader, we create Red Shoes experiences that are unique and personalized to the individuals that we know or that we don't know as we get to know them. So we have people that send pictures in from all over the country with stories behind them about Red Shoes. Red Shoes becomes the reminder to living this philosophy and being this way. I'm not saying everybody that wears red shoes understands the concept, but he does have red shoes on. I have spent time with Mr. Branson multiple times now, and he is absolutely that. He epitomizes that in his business, in his personal life. In some cases, maybe goes to the edge a little too far, but he's an incredible human being that people would run through walls for. So, Red Shoes philosophy alone is powerful. It's conceptual. It lives with you. Once you know it, it doesn't go away. It will haunt you. The framework, you apply it where appropriate, and you practice it. And like I said, I practice it as much in my personal life as I do in my professional life. I've been doing this for a long time now. I don't get it right every time, and I discover and learn new things. And people now iterate and add to the Red Shoes philosophy and framework, and they add content, and they add all kinds of things in the work that we're currently doing. Move along. There it is. There's the framework. Awareness, gratitude, everyone has a story, respect and kindness, and put yourself out there. Line them up. Try them in an instant. Throughout the day today, as you interact with people, just think about them. Be aware of the individual, right? Just start running right down through those. Okay. So this is really important. Philosophy, framework, sustainability. Everybody that's in this room today is part of the model of sustainability, meaning that you've come together in a community to learn, to be enriched, to create value. Nicole, I apologize, I'm going over. I know she's speaking next. She's part of your model of sustainability. So you have this great room, this great organization that puts this event on to sustain you. That's why the event is being held here, right? That's part of the energy of what I talk about. If you take that one more layer, you have a personal model of sustainability. We've interviewed thousands of leaders and asked the question, when you strive to live the philosophy, if you will, or even whatever your own success is, how do you sustain that? And this is what it came down to. This is my good friend Maz Iqbal. Maz and I have known each other for 4 years. He heard me speak in London. We connected. He had some feedback for me. I was open to the feedback. It was helpful. We became friends. Every Monday for 30 minutes we talk, and we have for 4 straight years. And here's his first question. He's part of my model of sustainability. What that means is he is my advocate, and he's my cheerleader in accomplishing what I'm trying to accomplish professionally and personally. And he holds me accountable to that standard. So every week, his first question, Lonnie, how did you show up in the world last week? And sometimes I'm like, not so good. Talk to me about it. And I talk to him about it. Are you getting rest? Why did you behave that way? What's important to him is he spends more time with his children as he's been retiring. So that's my first question. Did you spend time with Marco? Did you guys play badminton? Did you get on the bikes? What did you do this week? He's part of my model of sustainability. If I tweet something and he reads something into it that maybe I didn't mean, he calls me or sends me a message, you okay? He holds me accountable to this higher standard. So the theory is it's not exclusive. We're not pushing people out of our circle, but you surround yourself with people that make you better, that help you become the best version of yourself. It's critical to the success that you're going to have moving forward, specifically as it relates to red shoes. All right, this is the last video, and then we're going to close. So again, I apologize, I'm a little bit over. So I want you to watch this video, and I want you to think about the pillars, and I want you to think about yourselves as a leader. I want you to watch what Simon does. Again, think of the pillars. I want you to watch what the performer does, and if the pillars show up for him. Be patient with it, but watch what happens. So when you think about what Dave said about being customer experience managers and leaders, this is why I wanted to show you this. Watch the dynamic that happens between two individuals when everything is firing.
Hello.
Who are you, my love?
I'm Griffith Wyn Roberts. I'm Welsh.
Yeah.
I'm 22 and I live in a small island called Anglesey in North Wales with my nan.
Oh, fantastic.
What's your granny's name?
My nan's called Alwena.
That's a great name. Alwena. And why don't you live with your mum and dad?
Well, I don't. I live with my nan because I haven't known my father till I was 16. Yeah, this is quite hard, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go on, Griff. Go on, Griff! Go on, Griff!
Are you going to sing?
Yeah, I'm going to sing for you today, yeah.
And what's the dream?
Just selling out theatres like this, hopefully.
All right, well, good luck.
Thank you very much.
Un giorno sai per noi verrà la libertà di amarci qui senza limiti e fiorirà il sogno a noi legato si sferrerà l'amor gelato.
Okay, Griffin, I want to say something to you.
Okay.
Because you're very nervous.
Yeah.
This was very cold and mechanical for me. I sense there's more in there. I want to hear that warmth, that richness. I want you to just let go for a second.
Okay.
What else you got?
I've got Nessun Dorma.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Have a glass of water.
Yeah. I'll screw it up.
Thank you.
All right? Good lad. All right. Take a big breath. All right? Good lad.
Griffith, how good do you think you are out of 10?
Out of 10, I'd say I'm about a 6 at the moment.
That's what we just got. I want an 8. And above.
Nessun dorma, nessun dorma. Tu pure, o principessa, nella tua fredda stanza, guardi le stelle che tramondo amore e di speranza. Ma il mio mistero insciù in me, il nome mio nessun saprà, no, no, sulla tua bocca lo dirò quando la luce splenderà. Come on, Cliff! Ti leggo a notte tramontate stelle, all'alba vincerò, vincerò,
Okay, way over my time. That's it, right there. Both sides. Red shoes happen on both sides of that. As a leader, Simon got the best out of that individual. That individual brought it, put himself out there. I mean, it all just kind of comes together. Now, that's an extreme case, but this is what we're talking about. It's the standard that we're talking about. You have a choice to live a life of mediocrity or keep creating red shoes experiences and being a red shoes leader. I would tell you that keeping the human spirit alive is the most important thing in any organization, because it starts there and it translates back out to the customer. We spend half our life doing what we do. You got to keep coming back at it. You got to keep surrounding yourself. By the way, his model of sustainability, his buddies were the best. They were the best. They picked him up every single step of the way. I'm going to skip the last video and we're going to end right here. Forrester said this is the age of the customer, and I believe that's absolutely true. More importantly, this is the age of you. This is your time. And once you're on this path, when you go away, recognize the noise of the world is going to get loud again. KPIs, the metrics, all of these things that we talk about. You now know the philosophy and framework. Use it to turn the noise down to do the right thing. I really appreciate Dave and Burke and ClientSuccess having me here today. I appreciate all of you. It's been a pleasure. Hope you have a great rest of the day. And Nicole, look forward to hearing from you. Take care.
Thank you, Lonnie. Welcome to the stage, Nicole Paradise, Senior Director of Customer Experience, ADP. Let's hear it for her.